He had spent most of his life in shadows, not the kind that come from clouds, but the kind that linger inside a man when the world has turned its back on him. The small prison cell had been both his cage and his mirror, forcing him to face the man he had become. The walls were gray and cold, the floor hard and unforgiving. Every day had been measured in routines, in footsteps echoing in the hall, in clanging doors, in the distant shouts of men who had given up or those who refused to. He was a man of 38, rough around the edges with hands that told stories of labor and violence alike. He had been convicted of robbery years ago, a single mistake that had cost him more than freedom. He had hurt people, yes, but the years had a way of stripping away the fire and leaving only the flicker of something else inside. A sense of remorse that was neither loud nor boastful, but quietly gnawing at the edges of his conscience. Inside the prison, he had learned many things. He had learned how to read people, how to understand fear, anger, and weakness. He had learned which battles were worth fighting and which were best left alone. And in the quiet moments when the other men slept or when the guards were distant, he had begun to see himself not just as a criminal, but as a man who had once had choices and had perhaps lost the courage to make the right ones. His days were structured, almost ritualistic. Breakfast, a walk in the yard, work in the laundry, a chance to speak with visitors if they came. Sometimes there was reading, sometimes there was silence, and in those silences he thought about the world outside, the streets he had once known, the people he had hurt, the small joys he had missed. He thought about freedom like a child might dream about the sky, vast, unattainable, yet endlessly imagined. He had a reputation in the prison, one that was whispered with respect and fear. Other men kept their distance, unsure if they should trust him or stay away. He had learned to survive by keeping a low profile, by being careful with his words and actions. Yet despite the caution, there was kindness in him that had not fully died. He fed stray cats that wandered near the walls of the prison yard, giving them the scraps no one wanted. A guard had once caught him shaking his head, muttering about wasted efforts, but he had only smiled quietly, giving the cat a last pat before letting it go. He also wrote letters, not to anyone famous or important, but to his younger sister. She had always believed in him even when he had failed her. His letters were filled with small confessions, small hopes, and the faintest hint of dreams he dared not speak aloud. Each word he wrote was a thread reaching out to a world he longed to touch again. The days passed, each one almost the same as the last, but the thought of freedom always lingered like a faint light. He counted the hours, then the weeks, then the months, until finally the day came. His release, a parole that promised a second chance, a world beyond the gray walls and iron bars. Walking out of the prison gates, he felt the sun on his face in a way he had not remembered. The air smelled different, fresher, sharper. The city stretched before him, full of noise and motion, full of people who had lives that seemed distant and unreachable. He walked slowly, taking it all in. The sidewalks were crowded, but no one paid him much attention. He dressed in plain clothes, careful not to draw notice. He wanted to move quietly, unnoticed, yet every step felt heavier than the last. He did not have a plan, not really. He had saved a small amount of money, enough to rent a modest room for a while, enough to eat, enough to start over in small, careful ways. The world outside felt unfamiliar and yet enticing. He could feel both the thrill and the fear rising together, a knot in his stomach that would not untangle. He thought about the people he might meet, the lives that had gone on without him. He thought about how quickly the world had moved, how easily one could be lost in it, forgotten, and yet still be able to touch it in small ways. He had made mistakes, yes, but maybe, just maybe, he could make something right. Perhaps even save someone if the chance came. As he walked through the city streets, he noticed small details, the laughter of children, the smell of fresh bread from a bakery, the way the sunlight fell across a worn brick wall. These were things he had forgotten, things he had ignored in the chase of survival and the haze of anger and fear. Now they seemed almost miraculous in their simplicity. His new life was quiet at first. He found work at a small garage, fixing cars, using hands that had known more destruction than care to now bring machines back to life. The owner was wary at first, cautious about hiring a man with a record, but the convict's quiet dedication and honesty won him over. Each repaired car was a small victory, a reminder that he could contribute, that he could exist without fear and violence. He spent his nights in a small room above a shop, simple and sparse, but it was his. He cooked his meals, read the books he could afford, and tried to imagine the kind of man he wanted to become. The world was still full of shadows, of people who would judge him before knowing him, but there was also light, moments that reminded him of what life could be. Yet, even as he adjusted to the rhythms of ordinary life, he could not fully escape the sense of watchfulness that had been drilled into him during years behind bars. He noticed the way people moved, the way a hand lingered too long near a pocket, the way eyes darted nervously. His instincts were sharp, honed for survival. But now they were tempered by a growing desire to protect rather than to attack. And then, on one ordinary evening, as he walked home through a dimly lit street, he noticed a woman up ahead. She was pregnant, clutching her coat around her, moving quickly but cautiously. Something about her hurried steps and the tense look on her face set off a warning in him. He had learned to sense danger in small gestures, in the way a person moved, in the flicker of shadows. And he knew instinctively that trouble was near. He hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the choice he was about to make. For years, people had expected him to act violently, to take advantage, to be the shadow that haunted the city streets. But inside him, a different voice spoke now, a voice shaped by years of reflection, by small acts of kindness, by the slow, difficult work of learning who he could be. He stepped forward deliberately, with a careful, measured pace. The city seemed to hold its breath as he moved toward the woman. He did not know what awaited him, only that he could not turn away. For the first time in a long while, he felt the power of choice, not used to harm, but to protect. And in that moment, as the evening grew darker and the sounds of the city buzzed faintly around them, he became more than the man the world believed him to be. He became something unexpected. He became a man capable of courage, capable of kindness, capable of being a hero in the quietest, most human way. The first part of his new story had begun, a story not of fear, not of crime, but of a chance to make things right. And as he moved closer to the woman, ready to face whatever danger was coming, he felt the strange, exhilarating sense that perhaps this time he would not fail. This time he could be more than the mistakes of his past. He could be the unexpected hero. He had spent the day walking through the city, trying to take in the rhythm of life outside prison. Every sound, every movement felt sharper than it should. The laughter of children on the street, the clatter of a bus, the distant bark of a dog, it all seemed more alive than he remembered. He had learned to notice details in prison, small signs of opportunity or danger, but now that awareness took on a new purpose. He wanted to survive without causing harm, to exist without fear, and perhaps, if fate allowed, to help. That evening, the sky was painted in shades of orange and purple as the sun began to dip below the city skyline. He had just finished his first week at the garage. The work was honest, the pay modest, but it felt good to earn something without fear or deception. Still, there was an unease he could not shake. He walked home through streets that were familiar yet foreign. The world had changed while he had been away, and yet danger often lurked in the smallest corners. It was then he saw her. She was walking quickly, a small bag held tightly in her hand, her coat pulled close around her rounded stomach. Even from a distance, he could tell she was cautious, looking over her shoulder, her steps hurried. Something about her presence made him pause. The street was dimly lit, shadows falling in strange shapes across the walls. The city noise seemed to fade, replaced by a tension that was almost tangible. A group of men appeared ahead, seemingly following her. Their voices were low, their steps deliberate, almost predatory. He felt that old instinct, that sharp edge of awareness that had kept him alive inside prison, flare to life. His mind raced, calculating distance, timing, and possible outcomes. He could not ignore this. He had seen enough danger to know when a person needed help, even if that person had no way of knowing it yet. He approached slowly, keeping to the shadows, careful not to draw attention. His reputation, if anyone knew who he was, would have made people expect violence from him. But he did not want that. He wanted to protect, not harm, and yet he could feel the weight of every choice pressing down, each step heavier than the last. The woman sensed the danger before he could act. Her steps quickened, her breathing shallow, a whisper of fear in her eyes. The men quickened too, their intentions clear in the way they closed in around her. He knew he had to intervene, but he also knew that rushing could make things worse. He needed a plan, a way to protect without escalating the situation unnecessarily. He stepped into the light just enough for them to notice him. His presence was sudden, solid, and deliberate. The men hesitated, unsure whether he was a threat or an ally. His eyes met theirs with a quiet intensity that made them pause. Years of survival had taught him that confidence, even in stillness, could be powerful. It was not fear, not arrogance, but a steady assurance that he knew what he was doing. "Leave her alone," he said, his voice calm but firm. The words carried weight not because of volume but because of certainty. The woman froze. Uncertain, but relief flickered across her face. The men exchanged glances, murmurs passing between them. They had not expected interference, and certainly not from a man who moved with quiet authority rather than wild aggression. One of them stepped forward, trying to assert control. He noticed immediately how they underestimated him, how their confidence wavered. He did not move too fast, did not strike, did not threaten with unnecessary cruelty. Instead, he used his presence, his knowledge of danger, to create hesitation. He edged closer to the woman, subtly placing himself between her and the men, making it clear that she was under his protection. The men hesitated, their faces showing confusion and annoyance. The world around them seemed to pause for a moment, caught in the tension of uncertainty. The convict understood that sometimes the right choice was not to fight immediately, but to command respect through calm and decisiveness. He took slow, measured steps, making sure the woman stayed behind him, her small form close but safe. "We don't want trouble," one of the men said, trying to maintain a threatening tone, but he could hear the doubt in their voices. They had expected fear, aggression, perhaps a fight, and instead they were met with composed defiance. "Then leave," he said simply, his eyes never leaving theirs. It was not a question. It was a command, quietly reinforced by every movement he made. The men weighed their options, and for the first time, they seemed to question whether the encounter was worth it. The shadows of the evening made the street look narrower, more confined, and the men, for all their posturing, realized they were outmaneuvered. With a muttered curse, they stepped back. One glanced at his companions and shook his head, then turned and walked away, the others following. The tension slowly dissolved, leaving only the quiet sounds of the city and the woman's shallow breathing. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief and gratitude. He offered a small nod, careful not to overwhelm her with attention. His role was to protect, not to demand thanks. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. He did not respond with words, only a gesture toward a safer path ahead. They moved together, slow and deliberate, ensuring that no one followed. Every step was measured, every glance cautious, as he guided her through streets that were no longer just familiar pathways, but potential zones of safety or danger. When they reached a busier street, the noise and presence of people created a barrier between them and the threat. The woman's tension eased slightly and she managed a small smile. The convict felt a strange warmth, a sense of rightness that he had not experienced in a long time. He had acted not out of instinct for survival, but out of instinct for protection, and it felt like a step towards something he had been missing for years. She finally spoke, asking if he needed her to call someone or if he wanted help. He shook his head. He was not looking for recognition, nor did he expect it. His goal had been simple, to ensure her safety, and in doing so, he had found a small measure of redemption, something tangible that he could hold on to in a world that often seemed unforgiving. He walked away once he was sure she was safe, blending back into the shadows unnoticed. The encounter had left him shaken, not from fear but from the realization that he could be more than what society had labeled him. He had made a choice that did not define him by his past mistakes, but by his current actions, and that was a powerful, almost intoxicating feeling. As he continued down the empty streets, the evening air cool against his face, he reflected on the events. The city had not changed, but he had. He had confronted danger and chosen protection over aggression. The weight of years spent in prison, the mistakes, the regrets, the small acts of kindness that had gone unnoticed, they all seemed to converge in this single moment, reminding him that he could still influence the world for good. He thought about the woman, about her life and the life growing inside her. She had no way of knowing the struggle, the history, the internal battles he had faced, and yet her safety rested briefly in his hands. The thought was humbling but also grounding. It reminded him that every choice, even small ones, could ripple outward in ways he could not predict. He returned to his small room above the shop, tired but alert, carrying a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. The city outside continued its noisy, chaotic rhythm, unaware of the quiet hero who walked its streets. He cooked a simple meal, thinking about the future and the possibilities it held. He could not undo the past, but he could continue to act with intention, to protect when he could, to help when it was needed. Sleep came eventually, but his mind was alive with reflection. He imagined the woman walking safely to her home, the streets growing quieter, the danger fading into memory, and he imagined himself not as a convict, not as a shadow of his mistakes, but as someone capable of action that mattered. It was a small, fragile hope, but hope nonetheless. The night passed, quiet and uneventful, and the next day began with the same rhythm as before. Work at the garage, careful steps on the streets, small interactions with strangers. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. He moved differently now, more aware of what he could do, more conscious of the choices he could make. The world had not changed, but he had found a way to navigate it with purpose. And in that city filled with countless stories, countless lives intersecting and diverging, he had become part of a story that was quietly extraordinary, not for fame, not for recognition, but for the simple truth that a man, even one burdened with mistakes, could step forward and act with courage and compassion when it mattered most. That was the beginning of what could become a journey of redemption, a journey that would continue in ways neither he nor anyone else could predict. The evening was colder than he had expected, a sharp wind cutting through the streets and carrying with it the distant hum of the city. He had been walking home from the garage, the rhythmic sound of his shoes against the pavement a reminder that life outside prison had a steady, ordinary beat. But ordinary could be deceiving. He had learned to expect the unexpected, to notice the smallest details that could hint at danger. He turned a corner and saw her again, the same woman he had helped the night before. She was walking faster now, her coat tightly wrapped, her eyes darting to every shadow. She carried herself with a mixture of determination and caution, aware that something had threatened her yesterday, and perhaps could again. It was a strange feeling, seeing her here, a thread of connection forming in the quietest, unspoken way. He could not just walk past. He had made a choice once, and now he could not ignore it. There were men lurking near the alley ahead, their figures partially hidden in the dim light. Their movements were deliberate, almost predatory, and he felt the tension rise immediately. The memory of the previous night surged through him, along with the knowledge that the situation could be worse this time. He assessed quickly, calculating their positions, the escape routes, and the woman's path. He had learned to move with precision, with calm, using the instincts honed in years of careful observation. He stepped out from the shadows, making sure his presence was noticed. The men hesitated, unsure whether he was an ordinary passerby or someone with the confidence to challenge them. His gaze held theirs, steady and unwavering, and in that simple action, he projected an authority that could not be ignored. It was not anger or aggression, but the quiet certainty of a man who had faced danger before and survived. The woman froze for a moment, unsure whether to approach or retreat. She did not know him well, had not yet learned to trust him fully, but instinctively she felt safer with him present. He offered a small nod toward her, a silent message to stay close and move carefully. There was no need for words. The urgency of the moment spoke louder than any conversation could. One of the men stepped forward, trying to assert control, but he was met with a calm yet firm barrier. The convict moved deliberately, positioning himself between the woman and the threat. He did not strike or shout. He did not need to. His body language communicated protection, strength, and readiness, a silent warning that he would not be intimidated. The men exchanged uncertain glances, sensing that their usual tactics of intimidation would not work here. "Move along," he said quietly but with authority. His voice was calm, measured, and carried the weight of someone who had survived far worse situations. The words seemed to linger in the air, unyielding and deliberate. The men hesitated again, their postures shifting slightly as if weighing the risks of continuing. The woman edged closer, trusting him enough to follow, her steps cautious but determined. She could feel his presence behind her, steady and reassuring, a shield between her and the danger. Her heartbeat was rapid, but a sense of relief mingled with the fear. She did not understand him, nor did she know his past, but she sensed the intention behind his actions. He was here to protect, not harm. A second man lunged forward suddenly, attempting to grab the woman's bag. The convict reacted immediately, using a simple, controlled motion to block the man's path. There was no unnecessary violence, only precision and quick thinking. The man stumbled, surprised by the swiftness and accuracy of the movement, and hesitated, giving the woman a chance to step back. The other men froze, caught off guard by the unexpected intervention. He gestured toward a nearby street, signaling for her to move quickly but safely. The woman followed without hesitation, understanding that every second mattered. The men muttered among themselves, frustration and uncertainty written across their faces. They had expected fear, submission, or panic, and instead they were met with composure and strategy. Their advantage evaporated in the face of a quiet, unexpected courage. Together, they moved through the dimly lit streets, taking care to avoid empty alleys and isolated areas. The convict kept a steady pace, alert to every sound, every movement, every shadow. He knew the city's rhythms now, understood the small pockets of danger, and used that knowledge to guide her safely. She walked behind him, her hand gripping her coat, trusting him in a way that surprised both of them. They reached a busier street, where the presence of people created a buffer against the men who had threatened her. The lights from shops and street lamps bathed them in warmth, and the city's usual noise returned, masking the tension of moments before. The woman let out a breath she had been holding, relief flooding through her. She looked at him, gratitude and disbelief shining in her eyes. He nodded slightly, a simple acknowledgement of the connection forged in the face of danger. The men from before had disappeared into the shadows, their confidence shattered by the unexpected resistance. They had not anticipated someone who acted with purpose and intelligence rather than brute force. For the convict, it was a reminder that courage could take many forms, and sometimes the quiet, thoughtful actions mattered more than loud, aggressive displays. He stayed with her until she reached a place of relative safety, a small cafe that stayed open late, the warmth and light providing comfort. She paused at the doorway, turning to him. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. He shook his head, a small, humble gesture. Words were not necessary. The act itself carried the meaning. "Just stay safe," he said quietly. "That's enough." His voice was calm, yet there was an undercurrent of sincerity that left no doubt about his intentions. The woman nodded, her eyes lingering on him for a moment, a silent acknowledgement of the heroism she had witnessed. It was not the heroism of stories or legends, but the quiet humankind that mattered most in real life. He left without waiting for further conversation, blending into the streets once more. The night was still, the wind carrying a chill that reminded him he was alone yet not lonely. The city continued its rhythm, unaware of the small act of courage that had unfolded in its midst. He walked with a purpose, not seeking recognition, not needing it. He had acted as he felt he should, and that was enough. The incident lingered in his mind as he returned to his small room above the shop. He prepared a simple meal, the routine comforting after the intensity of the evening. Each bite reminded him that life was fragile, that moments of danger and safety existed side by side. And it reminded him that his actions, small as they might seem, could change someone's path in profound ways. He sat by the window, looking out over the quiet streets. The lights glowed softly, casting long shadows that reminded him of the past and the future. He thought about the woman, about the life she carried, about the way a single act could ripple through time. He reflected on his own life, the mistakes, the years spent in confinement, and the possibility of change. Redemption was not an easy path, but moments like this made it tangible, real, achievable. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of city streets, protective gestures, and cautious steps. He awoke the next morning with a sense of purpose, ready to continue the quiet journey he had begun. The world had not changed, but he had. He had learned that courage and kindness could coexist, that one could protect without harming, and that even someone with a troubled past could step forward when it mattered most. He returned to the garage, working with care and focus, repairing cars with steady hands and a clear mind. Each task reminded him of the value of ordinary life, of contributing positively, of shaping a future different from the one he had left behind. The city moved around him, full of lives intersecting in complex, unpredictable ways. and he moved within it with awareness, intent, and a growing sense of self-worth. The woman became a symbol in his mind, not of romance or attachment, but of the possibility of good, of the quiet moments that could define a life. He had saved her, and in doing so had saved a part of himself from the despair that had once threatened to consume him. He understood now that true heroism was not about accolades or recognition, but about stepping forward when it mattered, even if no one noticed. And so, life continued. The city's rhythm remained the same, but he navigated it differently, aware of the fragility of moments, the importance of choices, and the power of quiet courage. He had become more than the man his past had defined. He had become someone capable of protecting, of helping, of making a difference in ways both small and profound. The story of the unexpected hero was just beginning, and each day added another chapter, written in actions rather than words, in courage rather than fear, in kindness rather than harm. The city had returned to its usual rhythm after the tense night, but for him nothing felt quite the same. He walked the streets with careful awareness, noticing faces, movements, and the small patterns that most people overlooked. He had learned from past experiences that life could change in an instant, and the memory of the pregnant woman he had protected lingered in his mind. It was not a memory of fear or danger alone, but of possibility, of a choice made in the quietest, most human way. News of the incident had started to spread. The woman had told a few trusted friends about the man who had saved her, describing him as calm, confident, and protective. The story took root quietly at first, reaching neighbors, acquaintances, and eventually the local authorities. There were whispers about a hero among them, someone unexpected, someone who had acted with courage when others might have frozen or looked away. For him, though, the attention was unnecessary. He did not seek recognition or thanks. He had acted out of instinct, morality, and a quiet determination that he could be better than the past he carried. But he could feel the subtle changes around him, people watching, stories being told, the sense that the city itself was aware of an unseen force of good moving quietly in its streets. Even with the attention, he remained cautious. Life outside prison had taught him that society could be unforgiving, quick to judge, and slow to understand. People would see him as a convict first, a man who had made mistakes, and only then, if at all, as someone capable of courage. That knowledge weighed on him as he navigated the familiar streets, aware that every step could be watched, every action scrutinized. Inside, he wrestled with his own thoughts. He had been trained by years of survival to expect hostility, deception, and danger, yet he had chosen protection over aggression, kindness over harm. This internal conflict, the tension between past and present, haunted him quietly. He wondered whether society would ever see the change in him, whether it would recognize the small but significant acts of courage he had undertaken. The woman, meanwhile, was safe in her apartment, but the memory of the night lingered for her as well. She thought about the man who had protected her, about his calmness, his careful movements, his refusal to let harm touch her. She did not know him personally, did not know his past or his struggles, but she sensed the honesty in his actions, the humanity that transcended labels. The gratitude she felt was deep and genuine, a recognition of courage that did not require explanation or understanding of the past. Back in his small room above the shop, he reflected on the delicate balance of life. The streets, the people, the choices, all were interconnected in ways that could not always be measured. He prepared his meals carefully, maintaining the routines that grounded him in a world that still felt unpredictable. The garage work continued, and with each repaired car he felt a sense of accomplishment that was quiet, but profound. It was a reminder that redemption was built not in grand gestures, but in consistent, deliberate actions. Yet he could not ignore the awareness that some eyes were on him. Police officers occasionally paused when he walked past. Neighbors whispered, and some shopkeepers gave him curious looks. The reputation of his past preceded him, and he moved through the city like a shadow between recognition and anonymity. Every interaction, every glance was filtered through layers of expectation and assumption. And yet, he continued, driven by the understanding that his actions mattered more than perception. Days passed, blending into weeks. The woman occasionally left her apartment for errands, and he sometimes saw her from a distance, a quiet acknowledgement passing between them. There was no conversation, No friendship yet formed, only the understanding that a bond existed, forged in a moment of crisis and preserved by respect and discretion. He felt a subtle sense of pride, not from attention or praise, but from the knowledge that he had acted with integrity when it mattered most. The media began to catch wind of the story, reporting on a mysterious hero who had protected a pregnant woman from potential harm. Headlines were cautious, often focusing on the bravery of an anonymous man rather than his identity. Still, the story reached more people than he anticipated, and with it came the challenge of remaining unseen while continuing to act rightly. He did not fear fame, but he feared the misconceptions and judgments that might accompany it. His nights were spent reflecting, reading, and writing letters to his sister. He shared small fragments of his life outside prison, careful not to reveal too much but honest in his reflections. Writing had always been a way for him to process the complexities of life, and now it served as a reminder that he could contribute to the world quietly and meaningfully. Each letter was a thread connecting him to a reality beyond the shadows of his past. One evening, as he walked home from the garage, he saw a group of young men arguing in an alley. Instinctively, he paused, analyzing the situation. His eyes flicked between the participants, noticing the subtle signs of tension, the way hands moved near pockets, the way voices fluctuated with anger. He understood that conflict could escalate quickly, and he stepped forward carefully. Not to fight, but to guide, to diffuse, to protect if needed. The argument dissolved with his intervention, subtle but effective. He did not use threats or force, only the presence and authority he had cultivated through experience. The young men scattered, leaving the alley calm once more. He continued his walk, a quiet satisfaction settling in his chest. It was a reminder that heroism was not always dramatic, not always recognized, but still profoundly important. He thought again of the woman, of the life she carried, and of the ripple effect of his actions. One decision, one moment of courage could influence countless others, though no one might ever know the full impact. The city itself was indifferent to such quiet acts, yet the importance remained. He understood now that his role was not to be celebrated, but to act with integrity, to protect and preserve where he could. The following week brought more subtle changes. Neighbors greeted him with faint smiles, shopkeepers offered small words of thanks or recognition, and the city felt a little less hostile, a little more aware of the quiet acts of good unfolding within it. He accepted these gestures with humility, knowing they were not his goal but rather a byproduct of consistent, careful actions. Inside, he continued to grapple with his past. Memories of mistakes, lost time, and the years behind bars were never far from his mind, but the actions he had taken, the lives he had touched quietly, and the choices he made now provided a counterbalance. Redemption, he realized, was not granted by society, but earned through deliberate, ethical living day by day, moment by moment. He continued his routine at the garage, repairing vehicles, helping customers, and maintaining the small but meaningful stability of ordinary life. Each repaired engine, each satisfied customer, each small act of kindness became a building block in the quiet architecture of his new life. He was not seeking forgiveness or recognition, only a path forward that allowed him to contribute positively to the world. The woman eventually returned to her daily life with a growing sense of safety and confidence. She thought often of the man who had protected her, and though their paths had crossed briefly, the memory of his actions stayed with her. She recognized, even in the absence of personal connection, the profound humanity in someone who acted with courage and care. His actions had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that goodness could exist in unexpected places. He moved through the city with an awareness that every moment held potential. Every encounter, every choice had the capacity to influence outcomes, to protect, to save, or to nurture. The streets, once full of shadows and fear, now held opportunities for vigilance and quiet heroism. He had learned to navigate not only the physical landscape, but the moral terrain, balancing past mistakes with present actions and future possibilities. As night fell, he returned to his room above the shop, preparing a simple meal and reflecting on the subtle changes in his life. The world outside continued in its usual rhythm, largely unaware of the quiet hero walking its streets. Yet he understood the power of small, deliberate actions, and the significance of choosing courage and kindness even when unnoticed. The story of the convict who protected a pregnant woman was no longer just an isolated incident. It had become a lens through which he could measure his progress, his choices, and his ability to influence the world positively. He had discovered that redemption was not a grand event but a continuous journey, defined by repeated acts of integrity, bravery, and human compassion. He thought about the future, about the possibility of continued protection, of helping others in ways both visible and invisible. He realized that heroism did not require recognition, only consistent ethical action in the moments that mattered most. And with that understanding, he felt a quiet sense of purpose, a sense that each day offered new chances to act rightly, to protect and to live with intention. The night passed quietly, with the city's lights casting long shadows on the streets below. He lay awake for a while, thinking about the woman, the lives he could touch, and the choices that would define him. His past was still present, but no longer dictating his actions. He had the power to shape his own story, one moment, one act, one decision at a time. As he drifted to sleep, a sense of calm settled over him. The journey of redemption, protection, and quiet heroism continued, uncelebrated yet profoundly meaningful. He understood now that true courage was often silent, and true heroism was often unseen, and in that understanding he found hope, purpose, and the growing belief that even a man with a troubled past could change, could protect, and could become something greater than the sum of his mistakes. The city had become familiar to him now, each street, each corner, each alley a part of a rhythm he understood. He moved through it carefully, aware of both past shadows and present possibilities. Life had given him another chance, and he was determined to live differently, to act with purpose, to influence the world in small but meaningful ways. The incident with the pregnant woman had changed something inside him. He realized that heroism was not about recognition or reward, but about the choices made when it mattered most. Days turned into weeks, and he found ways to contribute quietly. At the garage, he was diligent, patient, and respectful. Customers came and went, unaware of the man's past, yet benefiting from his skill and dedication. His life was modest but full of intention. Each day he walked through the streets with awareness, always alert to the smallest signs of trouble. His instincts, honed over years of survival, now served not only to protect himself but also to protect others. He continued to see the woman from a distance, noticing her once or twice as she moved through the city. She carried herself with newfound confidence, her steps careful yet assured. There was a quiet acknowledgement in her eyes whenever she spotted him, a silent recognition of the protection he had offered. He did not approach her unnecessarily, understanding that the connection they shared was built on trust, not familiarity. Their bond was delicate, rooted in human compassion and courage rather than conversation. Word of the mysterious hero continued to circulate, and some began to wonder about the identity of the man who had acted with such bravery. The media shared cautious reports highlighting the courage of an anonymous protector. Still, he remained unseen, moving through the city quietly, aware of the attention but not driven by it. He had learned that actions mattered more than recognition, that integrity was measured by consistency rather than applause. One evening, as he walked home after a long day at the garage, he noticed a young boy struggling to carry a heavy load of books from a small shop. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, offering help. The boy looked up in surprise, grateful but wary, unsure whether the man's intentions were genuine. He smiled gently, a simple gesture of kindness, and guided the boy safely to his home. It was a small act, unnoticed by most, but it reinforced the path he had chosen, the life he was building through deliberate, quiet actions.